Hey, you need to go home. I have no issue.
I'm just teasing. I just scare everyone when I talk to them.
Call the annual meeting to order. Please rise and join the pledge of allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you all. Let the record show that all five elected board members are here. Student board members are not present. They are set furiously for fine. So let's dive right in. Meredith.
Thank you and good afternoon. I hope everybody is staying dry this evening or this afternoon. Before we jump into the board study session, I would like to take just a moment and give my recognition and appreciation to Shawnee Beecham, who is a program technician in the Ed Services Department. Shawnee is our mastermind when it comes to all things data, from curating and querying and sorting and filtering and cleaning and graphing. Without her, I think we would be in a much different place when we're looking at the data and how it's presented. On top of everything else that we do in Ed Services, that Shawnee does in Ed Services, I would say getting prepared for this meeting takes at least 3 months of preparation, but that doesn't include the ongoing going into areas and updating our sheets, our queries throughout the entire year. And so, you know, just appreciation, Shawnee, for your dedication to our district and knowing that what you do makes an impact on our decisions and our students in the end. So thank you.
Thank you.
And I asked her that she typically leaves at 3:30, so I asked her if she would stay after a little bit longer. So thank you for that, and please drive safe on your way home.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That most of the data is derived from areas, or you have to put the data in areas and then drive it back out.
So it's a combination. Some of the data and along all of the data in the binder, it'll tell you what the source is. So a good portion of it, in particular, our indicators, comes from Aries. But when it comes to AP or SBAC, that comes typically from the College Board data or the CASP data. Some of it we put it into Aries, and some of it we just extract, put it in a spreadsheet, and do the cleaning ourselves from that. Some of it comes from seabeds as well.
And so there's no automated way to like suck it in from seabeds or any of those others in the area.
There is, it's a download and upload, but then as we look at the data, we tend to put it into different ethnicities and subgroups. And so it takes a lot of then adding on those layers to be able to extract the subgroups so that we can look at it and by school and district, et cetera. So multi-steps. And what I gave you as well, in addition to your data binders today, what I gave was two packets, and I'm trying this out, so your feedback at the end is welcomed. One is a worksheet that guides us through. It has some glimpses or big picture concepts that are talked about. It'll have page numbers throughout that gives us indication to where in the binder we're referring to, and also a note section for you to just jot down questions or ideas that you perhaps want to bring to the table or take away for yourself. And then the other format, and again, trying to make this study session as helpful as possible for you as well as for our time together, is just the print off of all the slides in the note-taking format for you to follow along and make some notes if helpful. So as we get started, I would like to take a note or take a moment and just say that this is a crucial opportunity for us to delve into the heart of our district's progress and trajectories. As we gather here today, our focus is on the data, and this data serves us as a compass, guiding us through the landscape of our students' educational journey and experience. So the time that we invest, and I want to appreciate your investment of time for this annual review, is not just a routine, but a dedication that we can explore to some depths the collective efforts of our schools and districts, but it also helps us understand our achievement, our areas of growth, and areas where we can elevate our commitment to our students. And your active engagement, your insightful contributions today will undoubtedly help shape the course of our district moving forward. So thank you for that dedication. A broad overview. Give me just a moment here. There we go. Nope. There we go. Let me just make sure I got it right. All right, cool. So a broad overview for today is we will start with the top row, which will just be a rough, 10-ish minutes to give us an onboarding of some of our core values, the people and the programs that support us, a glimpse of the district snapshot of accountability, and then we're going to spend the majority of our time jumping into the middle three columns, which is our college and career readiness indicators, our advanced placement data, and our CASP data. With that, I will go ahead and get us started with just a broad overview, reminding us that at our steadfast commitment is to our mission, and this encapsulates the purpose and the aspirations that we have to serve our students. This is guided by our core values: academic excellence, equity, and engagement. And that drives our decisions and our reflections on our everyday practice and decisions. With all of this, we also align seamlessly with our LCAP, our goals that support in making sure that we are reaching academic excellence for all students, working to create access and success in an equitable fashion while decreasing disproportionalities in our learning environments, providing lifelong learners or professional learning for our staff, so that as we continue to work on areas of growth and work on how we can elevate our services, we're supporting our staff in meeting those goals and changes as well. Continuing to focus on our educational partners with families, partner schools, and various organizations that provide us the robust amounts of services and resources that we can provide our students and families. And then lastly, continuing to keep our students' social, emotional, and physical safety and wellness at the heart of what we do through our goal of safety and wellness. And a part of all of this, when we say it takes a village, that's not to be cliche. It really is an accurate statement that there's not one core individual that can make all of this happen. It's the collective efficacy of the entire organization of MVLA, and that includes our community. And so I want to give recognition of the data today and the achievements and the improvements that we're seeing, that it really is this collective effort of everybody putting their best step forward in the services we provide our students, continuing to grow and learn as professionals, and keeping students at the center of all of our decisions. And with that, we built committees around our goals, around our mission, around our core values, to continue to be a source of monitoring, as well as providing the carefully and strategically created feedback and actions that we do see throughout the school year with our students. So as an example, our admin council is a group of all the administrators that come together monthly to quarterly to either engage in professional learning and or engage in strategic thinking and planning, trying to work and solve around ongoing challenges that we see district-wide. Our district-wide counseling collaborative is all of our counselors that come together to, again, this year as an example, we really focused on our tier 2 and tier 3 interventions for our counselors and how they can best serve and support these interventions. Site leadership teams, this is the grassroots of the leadership here in the district, and that's where our department coordinators and teacher leaders meet on a weekly basis to handle or to support and talk about the hard and the positive conversations at the site level. And another example would be our superintendent student advisory committee, which is elevating student voice and hearing from our students what's working, what their feedback is, suggestions in moving forward. And again, these committees show a dedication, and that this is a collaborative effort where multiple voices and different representatives need to come together to be a part of moving this district in the direction to continue to support and commit our work to our students. Lastly, this is a graph that we have been using over the last couple of years, highlighting student success at the top and forefront of all we do. And that is grounded by our work with equity, layered by then and influenced by our board educational goals, which then influences and drives and is a beacon for our district goals, which then is an influence and drives and supports our WASC, our LCAP, our ELD, our MTSS work as an example, which then supports site goals, which ultimately in the end, we get back to supporting student success. And again, just a true example of the collaborative work and how it takes that village to bring to us the data that we're about to look at. So if we start with our CBEDS data, let me move in my notes here. CBEDS, which is the California Basic Educational Data System, provides us an accurate enrollment of our student body. This is the 22-23 enrollment. The reason why I am showing the 22-23 data for our student enrollment and not this current year is that all of the data that we're looking at is last year's data. It gives us the most accurate, well-rounded data. It takes sometimes a year to get graduation, to get A to G, to get AP. And so as we're in the 23-24 school year, we're looking at the results of the 22-23 school year, and then the past years to also show trends in that data. So as we can see in the 22-23 data, our populations district-wide are showing somewhat close in percentages between our Caucasian, our Asian, and our Latino. Again, you know, there's some differences between the two, but it's getting around a third ish in that area. And then off to our left side shows our programs and how many students participate in the big programs that we offer. 7% of the entire student population are English learners. That includes newcomers, and that includes LTALs, which means it's a student who has been enrolled in an American school for more than 5 years, but they have not reclassified from the LCAP test. Our resource students, which are special education students that are in mostly gen ed curriculum. So they're diploma track students. They're not special day severe disability students. Our 504 students, our AVID program, and FRE stands for free and reduced eligibility. And that is what the state deems as at poverty. Other sources of data that we don't use in here, but that we have referred to it overall is called SED, socioeconomically disadvantaged, and that has a little bit of a higher bar than the FRE. And if you think of what our state considers poverty, and that's for all of our rural, our urban, or suburban, it's a pretty low level, and you can see that we have 4% population. This is also acquired by the families turning in forms that we have to look at to see if they become eligible or not. And not all students and families turn in these forms for various reasons. So this number is not overly accurate like we would see with our AVID, our 504 resource. Those numbers we can pull right from the school, where the FRE, we rely on families turning in that application. And then on the right side of our CBEDS enrollment, we disaggregated our Latino data into various programs. The reason why we disaggregate our Latino data over other populations is it has the most variability in our student body. We don't see as many Asians or Caucasians, as an example, as being RFEP, which stands for Reclassified Fluent English Proficiency. We don't see a big change in our, as an example, Asian and Caucasian as being in the EL program. It's a very small number. And for us, with seeing the large variability within our Latino population, it also can tell us some telling data, telling narratives of our programs and how we're supporting those various programs for our Latino students.
I just interrupt that question about so Latino RSDC.
Yep.
At 49%, that means 49% of the Latino population
Is reclassified, correct?
And then up there where it says Latino regular ed.
Yep.
57%.
Correct. And can I clarify that Latino regular ed means any student who is in a is in college prep classes, is in regular ed classes, which a lot of your reclassified students are also considered regular ed.
So that's great. My question to know is, how many of the reclassified students are in those classes?
So we have out of the regular ed, that's a very good question. We have roughly 58% of that 57% as being regular ed. So close to half of the 57% are RFEP students.
That's pretty good.
And RFEP could be, as an example, reclassified back in 3rd grade, and they carry on that RFEP classification all the way through school, or they could be a senior and reclassified their junior year, and so they're newly reclassified, which sometimes when we're looking at the data and we're seeing, let's say, low A to G with our reclassified, it's a little bit complex because you could have reclassified students that for the majority of their time in school were in ELD classes, which are not A to G classes, and then just newly reclassified. Or you could have a student that came in reclassified and had access to all those A to G classes. And you're putting both of those in one lump category.
Sure.
If you go first.
Okay, yeah. So, given what you just said, it seems that a big goal we should have really doesn't involve us, but to have as many reclassified students as we can coming into 9th grade, because we want them to take ADC courses.
Mm-hmm. Correct.
So we're working on that, I see.
We have increased our collaboration with our partner schools. Last year and into this year, we've been working with their district level ELD. We're meeting with them to take a look at who the newly reclassified students are, and they're reviewing with us who their non-EL students are. So that way our incoming freshmen who are in the EL program, we have which is a small population. So this is doable to have these types of conversations. We have a strong understanding of who these students are. Some of them are newcomers in the 8th grade. And so they're coming to us as a level 2. And so, we're really meeting them where they're at, but having that collaborative conversation with our partner district just helps us be more prepared in working with them. And that's something that we've started to implement and have seen helpful efforts from our students or for our teachers and our administrative side.
And that's part of the state and LCAP.
Correct. That we also do what we call enrollment data, and we give all of our APs and district admin gets all of our incoming 8th grade data that includes math and English class, SBAC scores, attendance scores. So we're able to see if there's any students that were struggling in the 8th grade, and what do we need to do to help them be more successful from day one in terms of outreach, supportive interventions, case management, etc. So they don't fall through the cracks because now we have this information and we know we need to give them the extra support.
So do you just aggregate the scores for our step between the ones that were already reclassified before they got here and the other ones, and like in a separate category? Because that would be really useful to me, because if they supposedly were already reclassified, there still needs support, but it skews the other kind of statistics here.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know what to do with that, because that's the way that the government or the state as people classify it.
Mm-hmm. That's correct. We could do, and again, this is a lot of work. And so I'm not sure if this is something feasible for an annual report. I could, work with my team to learn a little bit more about how this data works, the data sorting. But we could take a look at doing a sort and seeing if we can pull out our reclassified students who've been reclassified for 1 to 2 years versus 2 to 4 years versus 5 or more years, and see if there's any telling data that comes from that.
Yes.
We've been looking at the subcategories again. For as long as I've been, exactly, 30 plus years, so I mean, to me, it's this data is only useful if we actually do something about it every year
what these subcategories we have, action items on each of these categories. This is what we're doing for this category, this is what we're doing. Otherwise, we look at the data every year. I know this is now the state, classifies, the demographics, and that's what they've chosen as a way to divide our complete demographics. So I gotta give you that's just my own input. That it's fine to look at, it's fine to have the data, but unless we have a plan for each category.
Yeah. Well, and I would say that we have been using the data across the years. Our EL program, which is continuing to shift based on the data, has gone through multiple changes because we keep seeing our Latino students through this data, and have been working to try different interventions and programs to support.
Then you say, okay, this Latino reg ed group. This is what we're doing. This is our action item for this year. Latino EL. This is what
So as we,
this is what we're doing for everything.
yeah.
That's what I like, and I think that's how we're going to look at it. And then what is our metric we're going to use, and then how do we follow that every year.
So as we go through today, that is part of the plan, is to point out some of our areas of growth and what the actions that we're currently doing and or will be doing to address what we see as areas of growth.
So Terry,
I couldn't agree more.
so Terry, you've actually had the 8 report. So I was able to look at that and then have a dollar amount and, very detailed goals. So for me, if we have, I'm sure you have other plans like that, we were required to produce. So I'm not asking you to do extra work, because I know this already is included in our work. But if you have your BLL plan and you included that in a study session,
Okay.
would probably eliminate half of my questions. Like, I don't have any questions down about A3G plan because you've already showed it. Because it's on your point, I know that you're working on these things. But right now I'm focused on just a lot of data, and I particularly have questions about BLL because our data isn't good. And so, but I'm sure you have a plan.
Yeah, so we'll get to those slides and I'll talk through this. And I hear what you're saying in the future. If we could implement the EL plan or some actions that we're doing in addition to the data, then that would just help you as you're reviewing this data. And it's to keep us on par, because I think we go to 5:30.
Can I have this one?
Yeah.
A question, and that is, you cover later how many credits students spend in EL before they start taking A to G, or is that totally variable? So you could be here for 4 years and never take an A to G if you couldn't learn English well enough. Is that true?
So it's pretty variable, and we'll get to that.
Okay.
And as we get there. So thank you for that question. So the last piece I want to point out on the CBEDS is what the other stands for. And this will be in many of our other data sources. And that is our non-Hispanic Native Americans. That includes our Hawaiian and Pacific Islander group. And that includes our Filipino group. And then the last thing are which is a small percentage, as well as our African American percentage. And so when you look through the data at either of those two categories, you may see from one year to another, it looks like it's a 15% increase or decrease. And I have a couple of examples that I'll show, but that's a difference of 2 or 3 students because the population is so small. I'm gonna speed through this accountability just so that we can get into the bulk of the data. We will go through all of this in more detail, but this just gives us an understanding of the compass or our guidance of our goals and what we're trying to support and if we're meeting these goals. And like I noted in the report, we have met and exceeded more than half of our target goals and are near the other half of our target goals. So our district is making good progress with our accountability.
Yeah, I mean, I think, I don't want to, I know you want to go quick, but this really emphasized here on the slide, because I remember this slide, 4 or 5 years ago, when we had first looked at it. We didn't have the numbers, I guess, 5, 6 years ago.
Yeah.
So.
7 out of 8. 7 out of 8 have shown improvement.
Yeah, right, so it just, I mean, you see, so I think it's.
Thank you for saying that.
Worthy to.
Yeah.
To express that, we made very large strides in many areas. For some of these targeted students that we have.
Thank you. And I'll also add, Sanjay, that was with intentional efforts, strategic efforts in working in each of these areas. So thank you.
And I really appreciate your report, and also the numbers on that, and we still have to go higher, so, but 80% is great.
And just may I point out that many school districts, not including ours so far, require you to complete A to G to graduate.
Yep. Very true.
And in such a high performing district as ours, that would be good, but we cannot inequitably leave others behind. So we have to meet those to the next.
Yep. The work continues. Absolutely. So big picture overall, what is the data telling us? MVLA is supporting our students in special education with increasing gen ed options. And a little bit later into the slides, I'll talk about our increase of co-taught classes and our decrease of SAI or specialized academic classes. We're seeing a small decrease in enrollment overall at the district level, decrease in our slight increase in our Asian, decrease in Caucasian and Latino, and staying consistent with our two other demographics, our other and African American. Our SBEC scores are showing somewhat consistent with other student performances from our indicators. We'll get into that in a little more detail. We've improved on 8 out of 9 indicators. We do see a small increase in our socioeconomically disadvantaged population across multiple indicators, which is very positive that we're continuing to look at our underrepresented, underserved students and make efforts and resources that can help them get access. We do see a gap in certain, we continue to see a gap in certain demographics. And again, we'll go into some details about that. And as just a reminder, you know, data is our flashlight. It illuminates our path to make sure that we're seeing what we're doing well, but also the direction that we need to continue to work or maybe even do a change course. So we're making sure that we're going the right direction forward. Yep.
The FX scores are out for last year. Yeah, and one thing, you know, and for me, one of the things that for me on that data is not only how to do year to year trends, but also how to do comparatively to what they were doing, especially in our union, Pally, and those kind of. So what I observed was we were doing quite well. Some cases we were above, and some cases we were not on par. I think we were particularly below, but on timeline. So I think overall, the data looked pretty good for me. I know that's. I didn't do a deep dive, so I can't really talk more to it. I'm still with everyone. So I thought at least last year's data was pretty on par with what the neighborhood districts were showing.
Agreed.
Is that the data we're looking at?
We will be looking at, yeah, that's the data that's in the binder. Yeah. That's correct. Correct.
That might be, and I'm talking about the website.
Yeah, the website. But by the way, do you articulate with those other districts for best practices you have?
Well, before we jump into that,
Yeah.
let me point something out. The demographics of the district are not identical. What would be much more useful is a demographic breakdown by school. So how are the Caucasian populations of these various districts doing on that spectrum? How are the Asian populations?
Yeah.
How are the Latino populations?
That's a good question.
The scores that we see are just overall average.
Yep.
But if you look at specific groups, you might discover that we are doing very well with Latino students, very well with say Asian students, and maybe not so well with Caucasians or whatever the combination works out to be. But I think it is important to understand that this difference exists, and what might be a best practice in one district might not be in another district.
That's true. If you can disaggregate the report to see what protocols or pedagogy or anything they're using in that population
Right.
compared to us.
Right.
I will say, in talking to some districts, I believe that we may do things differently, and every district does things differently. And doing this type of deep dive, other districts that I talked to didn't have the data that you were asking for, which is then when I just have the broad overview of that data. So it's a great point to make, that sometimes the overview isn't one, we can't, you know, when you're at a satellite image, you can't make street level decisions when you're looking at that far up of the data. So a couple of ideas that I wanted to share with you is, as we look through this data, lenses to consider is, one, understanding our student impact as we talk about our various programs and indicators, taking a thought or a moment to reflect on how is our class instruction influencing the numbers that we're seeing, as well as number three, taking a look at our system and how is our system helping, or is there areas of improvement in the system as well. So again, from student to class influence to system wide as we look through our data. So as we go into our board indicators, which also are college and career readiness indicators, I want to just take a couple moments and flashlight why these indicators are important for us to continue to look at as a study session with the board. But we also go into the site teams and have these conversations. I just brought this to the counseling meeting today, and we dissected this data. So this data is used from multiple teams. If you thought of those committees that I showed several slides ago, that this is not the only time that we're engaging in conversations over this data. And so where that takes with our board indicators is that this is also research best practice in using these as indicators to determine if our students are going to be college and career ready by the time they enter and end their senior year. So 9th and 10th grade, we want to be looking at on tracks with credits. We want to be looking at GPA. We want to be looking at grades, C or better. So again, no D's and F's, one of our board indicators. We want to be looking at A to G placement. And again, think about student experience, classroom experience, and systems experience with these. We want to be looking at attendance. A student who comes to school is much more likely to be successful and stay engaged and strong through the 4 years. And then one area that we still are working on how to track this is what we call affiliation. And that is that a student is engaged in some sort of extracurricular outside of class, whether it be a club, a sport, robotics, music. But again, research shows that if you are engaged or connected to something outside of class, you're more motivated, you're more focused on your work, and it gives you just those leadership skills that helps you in college and career as well. And then you see a little bit of a shift in 11th and 12th grade, assuming these students are on track. By the time they get to 12th grade, we start to add in making sure that their FAFSA application is completed, that their college apps are completed, and that's where our college and career resource, college and career counselors come in very strong, although they've also been supporting all 4 years. So know that our indicators are indicators that are really focused on this college and career readiness, which again is important that we take this to the sites, to the counselors, and we look at this with multiple parties. As this is how we're monitoring and tracking our students. In addition to that, we need to be reminding ourselves of the importance of our work. This graph is showing us on the left-hand side that just within 91 to 2016, a huge shift in the amount of jobs that we're requiring at least a bachelor's level degree to get that job. And then the 3 graphs to the right are showing all the way to 2031. The number or the percentage of jobs that are requiring at least a bachelor's level. And so as a school system, it is our responsibility to make sure that our students leaving our school are not necessarily going to a 4-year school, but has all of the opportunities, the A to G, the skill set, the leadership to be able to make that decision. And so when we look at our A to G completion, and this is what gives students access into UCs and CSUs, just a quick glance that this is really a rigorous course list. 3 years of history, 4 years of English, 3 years of math, 2 years of science, 2 years of same world language, a year of VAPA and an elective, all at a C or level, or C grade or higher. And this takes a student over the cross of 4 high school years to be able to complete all of this. We do have grade recovery and credit recovery for students who get a D in one of these areas. We don't want them to fall short of this opportunity. So we have options for them to get a grade recovery to stay A to G improved, because as we just seen, it could make a difference in being able to get a job that adds for a comfortable life or not. And so our data shows us, as pointed out a little bit earlier, 80% of our students are A to G eligible, which is a huge accomplishment for our district and a lot to be proud of. And when you look even more at the data, which is page 34 and 35 in your binder, if you just want to flip to that to be able to have a quick glance. Page 34 and 35.
Say that. So I just want to highlight that and then people in the chat.
Thank you. Couldn't agree more. Page 34 and 35 in the binder is where our A to G data is at. Or sorry, 33 and 34. 33 and 34.
They're calling about college readiness. That's a dashboard indicator, but it looked like we added in our district indicators to make it even more robust than what the state looks for. Could you maybe share where the overlap on the college and career readiness?
Are you referring to those ones? Sure.
Yes.
So the California dashboard takes a look at fewer indicators and includes indicators also like CTE, which is, as we talked about in Amber Woodward, or CTE program specialist presented, is also a program that supports college and career readiness. For us, we added more indicators to help with our tracking and monitoring, and that includes attendance. That includes breaking down the GPA by a couple of different levels. So 2.0 or higher is a trajectory of graduating high school with A to G completion, but 3.0 or higher is showing competitiveness and being able to get into a competitive high school. And so we want to make sure that we're looking at both forms of that data. And so our level of using data beyond the California dashboard, which is a great resource, really just spends accolades into being able to make sure that all key points we're able to tap into to have an understanding of how our demographics are navigating towards that college and career readiness. Is there anything else that you'd like to add with that? Thank you for pointing that out.
And one thing at convention, one group said we should rename our department. And I don't know if it's a bad idea in terms of the concept, because we have a lot of people that feel bad or the underdog or not valued if they're not going to go to college for whatever reason, if they are to rename it career and college, meaning everybody gets a career and we want you to be college ready, but not everybody will go to college, and it's not a crime to not go to college right away. We'd like you to be ready.
Right. That's a good point.
So, we go back to the other slide.
Yep.
Indicators. So I think we have some of those, but not all of those.
The only one we don't have is affiliation.
What about attendance?
Oh, I'm sorry. I put attendance on the slide deck.
Okay.
That's not a board indicator, although it's something that us in the sites in particular track, as they're the attendance monitors.
It would be super helpful next time if you could have this slide and you say this is what we need to follow preparedness, then we need to be tracking, particularly so. And as you know, we still have an achievement gap. So I think tracking this gradually, I think that's help us to figure out where, where we're doing well and where we.
Noted. Thank you, Vita.
So,
Yep.
Since you brought up these pages, I did, when I reviewed your site, I did have a question about them. So one is specifically with Mountain View High School, for, I think we see a trend of it basically kind of overall decline year over year. Right? Well, I don't see necessarily a similar type of decline for some of the type we're saying. So any thoughts on why we're seeing that about?
Well,
36. 36 and 38 is
so for the majority of this data up until 22-23, Mountain View High School had a higher percentage or almost an entire percentage of our EL students, and a little bit higher percentage of our RFEP students, and a slightly higher percentage of EL students in special education as well as free and reduced. And those numbers have been part of the challenge with what you're seeing as the difference in success between the two schools. EL students sometimes come in with greater challenges, whether they be language barriers or acclimation. And so that's where, Sanjay, some of your, one of your questions earlier about what are the actions. So for the course of probably the last decade or two, Mountain View had been working on really trying to focus our courses for our ELD program to be very academic supported. And by doing that, they created, science ELLs and social study ELLs and science English ELLs on top of the ELDs. And so in working to get our students graduated, which we did see improvement over the course of a decade for our EL students, it also pulled them out of A to G classes, which then we see the decline here. So one of the conversations that started to happen, and I want to, just give a appreciation to Dr. Meyer to also bringing this up a year ago, maybe a year and a half ago, is we need to have our EL students engaged in college prep classes, gen ed classes. What is the support? We need to start to remove our ELD specific classes, which is almost turning into like a self-contained class. So they have more exposure with their peers to the diverse student body. And that would not only help them with A to G completion, but that would also help them with some of the proficiency challenges that we're looking at, that we see when we look at our EL dashboard, the dashboard data for our EL proficiency.
What I look at, so basically year 2022, 23, this last year, right? Mm-hmm. So that was basically, 12th grade, so if you go back years, what we see is that the students that were 12th grade last year, they experienced COVID, basically in the year 2019-20. So they're the ones who basically were affected by this. Were they the ones basically, so when we had distance learning, so that year and a half or so, basically where they kind of fell behind, either we had more P's and F's, right?
Mm-hmm. And that was the group most severely impacted.
With that A through completion, this is where that's what I'm assuming that's what happened here, but maybe I'm wrong. And I guess my question to that is that, are we able to see in the future, like coming out this year, that okay, what this trend that we saw here, do we see that coming back the other way to what we saw basically in 17, 18, 19, where trends were kind of going more in an upward direction? Are we getting back to that as we come out of COVID? I know that maybe I don't know if we thought about that, but that's something I like to maybe get more understanding for, especially with those students. Are we seeing it coming back after COVID? That's my assumption that they were affected by COVID.
For A to G completion? Well-
You got 4 grades, right?
So, yes, Ann, so you're absolutely correct in that, one of the most highly impacted group during COVID was our English language learners. Another challenge though, when we look at A to G, is that if you're in EL, currently our EL program, the classes are not A to G. So you're put in classes that will not get you A to G eligibility. And especially if you come in as a newcomer and you're a freshman and you stay in EL until maybe the beginning of your junior year, you just lost all opportunity of being A to G eligible for that. For that very reason, and Sanjay, this to your point of, what are the actions that we're learning from our data, is we are revamping our ELD program moving into next year. We are getting our ELD courses A to G approved, our 3s and 4 designated as Gs, our ELD lit as a D level, so that's, or sorry, a B level, and so that's an English ELD. We are putting our 3s and 4s into grade level English with support, so they're getting acclimated with their peers to be in an English class A to G, and so we're hoping that we're getting them on track for that A to G eligibility, and not saying because you're an EL student, you're a newcomer, sorry, you're not going to be able to be A to G eligible, which unfortunately is the way that the system is built right now. So again, looking at the data, having a lot of conversations into our courses, into our instruction, we're making these changes of bringing A to G into our ELD courses so that our students have that equal opportunity as a regular ed student coming in as a freshman. And so I'm hoping what we'll see over the course of a few years as we implement these changes is that these numbers drastically increase. And part of that, and if we just go back to our data, part of that is number 3, taking a look at our systems and saying what part of our system can we be changing to support the data that we're seeing areas of growth.
And just the data indicates it's actually not so much just the EL, but actually the Latino regular ed. That's the one that brought with the try not. That's probably the group that concerns me. Why
yeah. So that's what I was wondering also. I love that we can celebrate A through G completion, and I love to see like the numbers specifically for Abbott. That's very much aligned with the program, and then the overall Latino population numbers, and not just like I assume some of the pieces you're moving around the EL, but we need to be looking at like all of them, and I really generally and all of this data that I was looking at, like. There is work to do.
Couldn't agree more.
So many of these indicators.
Yep.
I'm glad someday after function like we're the specific action, because that's what we really need to be focused on.
So in addition to taking a look at our A to G eligible classes and making sure that anybody who's in EL or RFEP or Reg Ed is getting access to A to G, we're also rolling out what we're calling constructing meaning, which is district-wide tier 1 universal design instructional practices for students. It's run by an organization called EL Achieve, but it's really just strong discipline specific instructional strategies that supports all students. And it shows great success, and not just, it shows great success with students who are reclassified, students who are English learners, students who are special ed, students who don't have a category but are shy and just need some access, students who are AP. And it takes you from having academic understanding to sophisticated academic understanding and articulation. And so, what are we doing with it? We're taking a look at our systems. We're taking a look at our instructional practices, and we're having these conversations with departments at site level, as just a few examples. And then down below where it says next steps, I also wanted to point out that, up above, 80%, that's a celebration where we increased in 12 out of 14 demographics. We saw a nice increase with special education, and I want to pause on that for a second, as there's been also a lot of concerted effort going into our special education program. In 2019, we offered across the districts 10 co-teaching classes, 10 gen ed co-teaching classes for our special education students. In 2023-24, so that's this year, we've expanded that to 30 classes district-wide as being access for our special education students who would typically go into what we call specialized academic instruction, non-A to G, into a co-taught class. So again, 10 to 30 co-taught classes that gives our students access. So what does that do on the flip side? In 2019, we had 50 distinct sections of SAI, and so those are specialized classes for special education students, non-A to G. This supported 457 students. This year, we have brought this number down because of our intentional instructional support, our co-teaching and our training, from 50 sections to 27 sections of SAI. And the 2019, we had 457 students in these SAI classes. This year, we have 196 students because that group is now being inclusive in our gen ed classes.
So that leads me to believe, is there something?
Yeah.
Similar to the reclassified for SPED, like our SPED, or there should be, so that you're not, because some of them we inherit or get from the partner districts, and there may be no need with proper support in tier 1 and tier 2 and TSF support for them to even be classified as special ed.
Mm-hmm.
So I think
Well said.
special ed, is a wide range of studies, but what I would like to ask you is your goal to have co-taught courses so that the student can remain in special ed and get the support and complete their is that your end goal, that they complete their A3G just like with your young students?
100%. But in addition to that, the goal would be to wane the co-taught classes in the junior and senior year. So we're helping them build the skill of what it means to be in a gen ed class, what it means to do homework, what it means to be an advocate when you have questions, what it means to interact with your peers. So we're coaching our students in their freshman and sophomore year hard with that. And then by the time they get into their junior and senior year, we're taking those training wheels off. So then by the time, if they choose, they go into college, they have equal opportunity to be as successful as their peers because of this coaching and this waning, and now they're on independently.
And I like the word weaning them off being classified as special ed.
Thank you, weaning.
Because they are maybe neurodiverse or they have certain things, but that does not mean they can't interact in a normal environment.
Exactly. So as we move to another indicator, which is GPAs, so it starts on page 51 and it spans through page 64, I believe, and this covers our freshmen 2.0 GPAs, our 3.0 or higher, and our freshmen no Fs. What we see overall is that there's an increase. We've seen an increase in our freshmen in their GPAs. We've seen an increase in all groups with also achieving a 3.0 GPA. Now, again, that could mean that they're in a non-A to G class, which is where there's a discrepancy in that data. We do see a correlation in grades as well as AP scores, as well as Algebra 2 scores. So our grades are not isolated in seeing some of these improvements. So when we think about instructional practices and student experiences, through that lens, what is that data telling us? And then I did note that there is some difference between GPAs and CASP scores. That should be more. This occurs more in math than ELA. And I apologize, I have a couple typos on this bullet. And it is primarily more with our ELD students than with any other student. And again, that's a discrepancy with their GPA to their CAS score. And we can talk about that a little bit later about if you're a newcomer or an ELD2 student and the challenges that that encompasses when you go to take a junior level ELA test or a math test. And so some of that data could be understood.
So I just wanted to ask you, my previous learner, what they were bringing out to do, what office it's very detailed. People should not commenting on algebra 2.
And
So, I just wanted to ask why algebra 2 was brought out specifically as a class that we're looking at the,
Algebra two,
GPA.
algebra two, the algebra two specifically has to identify as within the math pathway as the obstacle for most critical learners to be able to pass that class, that course.
It's also A to G.
That's
Do
also-
we have an equivalent like in these other classes, that are barriers?
Math has always been considered the biggest, part of and both when you look at like, achievement gaps, math has always been basically probably the primary, issue where we see the biggest gap in achievement is math. Or much more so than, English language arts.
Also, Wayne Satterwhite was a big driver of adopting algebra 2 as a criterion. And her reason was very similar to what Sanjay was describing. And that she felt this was the gateway course to being able to take other courses instead and prepare for careers instead that required mathematics.
that's what I was gonna say too, is that the sciences, almost all of them rely quite a bit on math. And at that level, it shows you that you're confident enough to do a lot of that other stuff.
Right, for example, you can take a college level chemistry course, you can take a college level physics course, knowing only algebra 2, if you're good at algebra 2. But you can't do it with just algebra 1.
Correct.
An equivalent skill might be literacy at grade level.
So,
That opens up all the.
yeah, so
It's not a
what-
discrete class.
it's not a discrete class, so that would be harder to measure. Because one of the things we're definitely seeing, right, is this big gap with our, Latino population, and so one of my questions is, yes, they're reclassified, but is their English actually at a level where they can really understand it? Because, taking a college class, the English is at a much higher level than speaking.
Mm-hmm.
So, and you know that reclassification is frankly not at a high school level, it is lower than that.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm wondering if there's a way to measure that gap to see if that is an issue. Because if we don't actually know exactly why, we're seeing these lower scores, it's harder to sort of figure out what the issue is. Is it the language is not quite up there? Is it math? Is it both?
It's a complex system, right? There's not one factor that comes down to it. I heard you say it's both. It is multiple factors. Going back to Sanjay's point about what are the actions, several years ago, we worked with the foundation to lower the class size in all Algebra 2 classes. So we have a smaller student to teacher ratio, knowing that it's such an important class to not only get your A to G eligibility, but that gateway into the higher level science, et cetera. Recently, we've been just tickling the idea of, for some students, do we move geometry after Algebra 2? Because geometry is a very language heavy class, both speaking and reading and writing, where Algebra 2 is minimal to that. And so if we do Algebra 1 into Algebra 2, does that help with some students who may have a language barrier, but could be successful in that continuum of the math courses? And so when we look at this data, we do have these questions about, okay, so what are our next steps? what are actions that we could take or we could try to see if we see an improvement with our students. And then we also have IA support. And so if we have a large enough number of students who are EL or students who are special education, not co-taught, in a certain class, we do work to put an IA in there to help with some of the translation, not necessarily translating, I should be careful when I say that, not interpreting the English to Spanish because that holds back on a student's proficiency, but they just give that extra one-to-one support that could really help a student who comes in with some access gaps compared to their peers.
To your second, like point around like evaluating the improvements of class instruction, how much training or development are you giving teachers to be able to teach our EL students when they aren't teaching ELT courses, but very much have students integrate. I think integration is good, and it's only as good as teachers are equipped to be able
Yeah,
to teach.
Esme, if I could build a bell schedule that included teacher collaboration and professional learning every week, I would be in heaven. And if I could build a yearly schedule that included valuable opportunities to engage in professional learning, I would be in another universe. I think that's beyond heaven, maybe. And so we have to be very creative because we have very little time for actual given professional learning based on our bell schedule and our yearly schedule. And so we have been working, as you saw in one of the committees, we have a professional learning planning committee because this is such an important topic of how are we supporting our students. So in addition to constructing meaning for all, we just went through 2 cohorts. Over 50 teachers have been trained in constructing meaning. Over the next 2 years, all of our other teachers are going to be trained in constructive meaning. That's huge. Our district has never done that before. In addition to that, we have begun to do creative ways at which we are trying to work with department specific. So we do pull out professional learning. We have our ethnic studies teachers pulling out to do retreats 4 days or once a quarter, so 4 times a year. Part of that is professional learning on ethnic studies, the content, the curriculum. Another part of that is time for collaboration of building lessons, sharing best practices. We're doing the same thing with our ELD teachers. They're having a retreat day once a quarter. Some of that is professional learning. Some of that is them discussing and taking a look at textbooks, because right now instructional materials is something that is a goal for us to bring in, or it's a need for us to improve our instructional materials. They're pretty outdated, and this year we're increasing and integrating more textbooks and materials for our ELD programs. Course teams have also had full day retreat days to build in this professional learning. And so given the tight system that we're on, we are not only doing district-wide instructional, but also department-specific instructional. And again, there's room for improvement, but when I share our professional learning plan with other districts, they're floored that we're doing what we're doing. And it really goes back to, you look at your budget and it tells you where your values are. And when we see how much money we're spending into training our teachers and providing retreat days for our teachers to collaborate, that just shows that we have put a lot of value on not just teacher collaboration time, but also building in the opportunity for them to learn in their craft to be more effective with their students. And it continues to be an area that we will need to continue to grow in, as we see the data tells us that as well.
Terry, I think it would be wonderful for the board to, if you have an opportunity to pop into, especially constructing meeting, because the department meetings are more internal. But there could be other opportunities, because I would really love you to see how hard the teachers are working around looking at these topics, looking at data, and having been to them myself, they're very well planned and very well done, and large groups of teachers are attending. So I want to put that out there because I think it makes a difference when you can see it. Just want to commend that work.
And I would guess in the class, there's sort of some situation or whatever, so that the takeaway can then be summarized in some key bullet points or whatever that teachers or whatever can keep on the wall, like our goals or whatever, that are, these are the key things that we're you know, here we learned all about each one of them, but these
Mm,
key
yeah.
statements will help us refocus all the time on making sure we're doing that.
So you're actually making a very important point. PIM, as you go through your master's program of educational leadership, you'll find that there is planning for initiatives, they're implementing the initiative, and then probably one of the most important elements of that is the monitoring of the initiative. And that is after the implementation is done, after the 5 days of training is done, how are we holding accountable of the work that we're set out to do? How are we providing time for teachers to continually, to your point, Catherine, have time to go into their lessons and revamp their lessons to incorporate the new scaffolding and approaches and routines that they learned? That monitoring piece, I would say, is something in the past that has been a challenge for us, but I think this is something that is not Mountain View Los Altos specific. It's why it's, you know, in all best research and leadership programs. And that's an element that we've embedded into our constructing meaning. So as you leave a cohort, you're given a coach that will continue to go into your room, do observations, talk with you, give you feedback, as well as have pull-out days for those cohorts to then work together to continue to refine their lessons. And we're working with an organization from EL Achieve called Constructing Meaning. They've been with us for 4 years. They train the instructional support team so they can continue to be our trainers. And they would say loud and clear, if you guys think 5 days of training for a teacher is all it needs to see some changes, then we're just going to tell you, don't waste your money with us. Save your money. You have to have a system in place where you're going to on-go monitor and hold accountable of the work that they're learning while they're in these 5 days of your training.
And I'm thinking more also of like the cheat sheet, like in computer stuff. I was just going through some old stuff I have. I have the Unix system quick guide or whatever that has all the commands. You know, I think a little
Yep.
hundreds of commands, but they're all there together to just go and kind of remind yourself of what's going on. Or if you want to look up one thing, you can really click on the right command. So, you know, the same sort of thing with them. They have their summary of the main point.
Yep.
So if they want to, on their own, review, or when they need to say my lesson isn't totally reorganized, that if I look at this just before I go into class, that can remind me to try to integrate it as I go. Because they're all good on their feet. That's what teachers are good at, right?
Thank you.
As far as constructing media, it sounds like it's a really important program. I'm wondering, if you need resources, if it would be, appropriate to present a presentation to the board. I know there's no one here, but actually there are people who watch this, particularly from the MVLA Foundation. And they may watch it and go, oh, you know, we could do something, right? They helped us in many ways. And so if you're looking for resources, and closely with them also learn about it as well. But I think if this is an important program that is very, if it's not, you know, maybe half an hour on it, hopefully not like this where we're going into massive detail, but kind of a high level presentation.
Thank you. Duly noted. I appreciate that suggestion.
That is providing this particular kind of training.
Correct. So moving into attendance, which is also an indicator, although we don't keep it as a board indicator, this attendance is something that is more at the site level that they support. I do want to give us some broad overviews of where we're at with our attendance. It continues to be a challenge. We do see chronic absenteeism slightly increase from last year to this year. We also see the number of days absent in general slightly increase from last year to this year. I will note up in this upper box where it says unexcused absences, which is a real indicator. We do see a decrease in that, so that's a pretty telling sign. And then it's also nice to just do a check-in of where other people are at in terms of their attendance. And we do see, compared to the county and the state, that our attendance is at a slightly stronger level than the other two. But this doesn't mean that we sit back and say, you know, well, isn't that a shame? I hope the students start to come. So we have a district-wide planning we have a district-wide attendance team, led by William Blair, supported by the site administrators of Suzanne Woolfolk, Kristen Castillo, and Marty McGurk, and then they go back to their sites as representatives. Last year, we worked very closely with the county on a program called Attendance Works. This year, we're doing even more work as ourselves. And this just shows our intervention protocol. And at multiple steps of a student's absence, we have an intervention ready to happen all the way to the very end, to where it's going to go to the district attendance response team that elevates it to a critical level of decision-making or next steps. This involves community, this involves parents, this involves teachers, this involves our counselors, this involves assistant principals. And again, you know, saying, you know, what's the actions that we're doing based on the data that we're seeing? We've never had an intervention protocol like this before. In addition to this protocol, I want to also note that this is not punitive. Any good research that you read about attendance says that if you discipline students for being absent, if you tell them start showing up, you're missing class, you need to be here so you can learn, those students are going to walk away, say, yeah, right, see you later. We really need to take this approach as what's going on. How can I help you? Tell me what the challenge is, building connection with the family, finding the interest. What is the student interested in, and helping them become affiliated with that interest into the school so that there's something in addition to the classes. Sometimes it's providing various resources that we're finding out once we get into the stage of really trying to engage with them and re-engage with them. And that is part of this protocol as well, is taking that proactive, supporting, engaging approach, and not just withholding privileges because you missed too many days of school.
For this, we have the COVID, we got option B.
Mhm.
Which is the one online. We have data for those students, how many who continue with option B for graduation. Did everyone graduate and what that chose option B? Do we have any students that ended up not graduating and what happened?
Yeah, so option B data is not in here, so we can definitely pull that data. Part of option B as we went back into school is that if you weren't successful in the independent learning, then we had you go to the on-site. And so I would have to pull the data to see, Sanjay, any seniors, but freshmen through juniors, they went back to that on-site. And we still have option B as an independent study option for our students. The numbers are pretty low right now. It's under 40 or under 45, I believe right now. And it's a lot of students who are taking pretty intense extracurriculars like dance or music, and they're doing a lot of traveling is the majority of that. And then a small percentage of the students in this FISP are those with mental health needs, whether they're in a facility and it's a full day treatment program to where they need to have an independent study type program, as another very small percentage on who's in option B still.
And we still have, one or more teachers assigned to be there.
They're mentor teachers. So Tamisha Wise, who's a counselor over at Los Altos High School, and Shannon Porfilio, who's also a teacher at Los Altos High School, is supporting that mentorship role, as well as helping with the coordination of the program, meeting with the parents, communicating regularly with them as well.
So I remember you saying that, I think it was or you saying that it's on campus but not going to class. And they said, and that's lack of connection and not feeling that my efforts are reflected in my grades for the two things. So it sounds like you're working on connectedness, but what are you doing in terms of the other?
Just so I'm answering specifically your question, could you clarify what you mean by the other issue?
So connectedness, I guess you're connecting them with teachers. So they have
or extracurriculars, helping them find interest.
They have that feeling connected. So that part you're working on. So what I'm asking you is, the other feedback was my efforts are not reflected in my grades. So what are you providing to address that? This is what students are telling you. Have you lunch day initiatives to address that issue.
Mhm. Okay.
Are you seeing that that is an issue, or do students also failing their classes that they do attend?
So great question. Thank you for clarifying. A couple things. One is when we look at the data, the no D's and F's, the 2.0, the 3.0, we're seeing pretty strong success amongst almost all demographics in those grades. So want to just point that out. The second is over the pandemic, and then kind of faded into the year that we came back. We did work on equitable grading. It was what guided us is a book by Joe Feldman on equitable grading practices, and we did some book study. We did some department conversations. We took a look at our standards. We took a look at our grading scale. We took a look at the feedback that we're giving students. I think that is still a need for ongoing area. And I think it's always going to be, right? It's not something that's a one and done in terms of a conversation, but we did spend a good portion of, again, our given release time for PD to engage in equitable grading conversations. And part of that came from, like you said, the feedback that was given, as well as really wanting to make sure that we are creating an environment that is trying to minimize implicit bias or barriers that we're not intentionally trying to set up, but that are set up with our grading systems.
So did that probably include dealing with late assignments? Like if you're not in class, you probably didn't turn it in on time. And then also redos, the ability to change it or improve your score after giving some feedback?
Yeah, so conversations, and again, some of this was department specific and how they navigated that, but that included anything from the grading scale of what could be called like the double F or the toxic zero, or how are we giving feedback, and formative feedback is highly more effective than summative feedback. So waiting at the end to do a big test, but not giving those small, timely feedbacks that help students progress during the intra unit was another conversation that also included some support in terms of instructional practices of what does that formative feedback look like on the teacher's end. It also included conversations about homework load. Or when a student doesn't turn in a homework, sometimes that's not because they were lazy or they forgot it, that there's a lot of, the what's it called? The toxicity of a single story, that a lot of our students have challenges once they leave that can become barriers in not having a homework done. And so one, being cognizant of how much homework you're giving. Two, being cognizant of what the purpose of the homework is are we giving homework for homework's sake, or is the homework moving the needle, and really asking us to think about redefining either homework or homework load. And then also taking a look at our grading categories, and are we grading for effort, right? Are we grading for homework completion? And is that really equitable to grade for homework completion, which it could be an opportunity gap for some students versus some of the more formative assessments that you're able to do in class that could be graded. So again, I mean, I'm just summarizing the vast amount of conversations that I sat in or read through the notes of a lot of our departments, and those were what came up when they had conversations over equitable grading practices.
I guess I want to ask about, I know we had 4 policy discussions a few years ago, and I know there was a lot of discussions about it. I guess I assume nothing has changed since that policy, or
Since we added a couple more homework-free weekends.
right, we had one of the discussions I recall very much was basically giving homework, so you kind of figure out.
Correct.
And to me, that was a very, to me, it's somewhat of a controversial topic, because I think it's very difficult to say what is how much and what is not enough. Because I think a lot of it could depend on every student is different. And sometimes more homework is better for many students to be able to make sure that they continue to, basically master, a subject matter. And sometimes it may feel like, hey, this is above and beyond what I need to do, and it's a lot of work. but it is a benefit to the student,
Mhm.
whether they may realize it or not. And we, you know, for those of us who are parents who know that, you have kids, right, that basically they don't want to do it, right, they don't do it, but it benefits them.
Mhm.
So I just think that I don't know where I just brought it up, and I don't know what, I'm not saying that there's anything in our district that we're doing different, but I just hope that, I recall that topic that we had this discussion about.
Yeah. And we had genuine conversations with teachers, but we didn't turn it into any type of mandate. And I do want to note that I would say the majority of the teachers really engaged authentically and listened and worked with their course team or their department to take a look at what their homework policy was or what their homework load was or when and how often and why. I agree with you that taking the learning outside of the school day is needed for many classes, not all, but many. But it is, how is that guided? Like, what is, you know, how is that student coming in the next day and building off of that and just making sure that that homework is truly helping the access to the curriculum, and those students who want to go above and beyond, that we're also supporting them and being able to go more in depth without requiring it to meet proficiency of that class, right? And so not, if that makes sense.
Would we be
Mastery, thank you.
would we be party to some of the notes like that, or the summaries, like you were summarizing it out loud?
For the equitable grading?
Well, are any of these types of sort of things we're working on so that we have a little bit of, I mean, you can't be writing little reports every other day on what happened in a meeting, but on a big issue like this, summarize the kind of work that's been done, and it's like just a half page of bullets or something like that, so we kind of know the kind of things you're thinking about.
So we have both Google Form surveys that do that, or depending on what the PL time was, we have a Google sheet where course teams had to go in and they had to write, you know, what their 3 takeaways were, or what their decision was, or what their goal and their actions were, in some of the cycle of inquiry work.
Well, I would just love to see some of those things. If, I mean, without causing copious more amounts of work for you guys.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I mean, if you have the data, you would have it, you probably, if there's some easy way to give us a summary. That'd be great.
Thank you. Okay. So we'll move on to a couple more of our indicators and then bring closure to this particular section. This is an indicator, a very important indicator, and this is our graduation rate. This is a class of 2023, and on the left-hand side, it just shows all demographics. And we see us hovering around that mid to upper 90s in our graduation rate, an area that we see time and time again when it comes to who is that 4%, and this is on the right hand side. First of all, we have a special education population that goes into ATP as their 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th year of graduation, and we, as well as CalPADS, still counts those as non-grads, because they didn't graduate in 4 years, even though we know that they're not graduating in 4 years. And so there's been kind of some controversy of why do we include them if this was the trajectory. But that's, you know, how the state counts them, so we do as well. We also have some students in just a regular special education program that goes on to get a 5-year, and that is part of what their IEP process is, and that can even be diploma track students. And so that is a small population, but the trend of that population in that 4% who didn't meet graduation this past year. And then as well as we have a small percentage of newcomers who come to us pretty credit deficient and is not able to make their graduation credits within 4 years of being with us, or if they come in as a junior within 2 years of being with us, or as a senior, 1 year of being with us. We do have an option given by the state called AB 2020, which says that if you're a newcomer coming in as a junior, and there's no possible option for that opportunity for that student to graduate with our given graduation credit requirements, that those students can be waived and go down to the state requirement. So we do have a few students who we support with AB 2020, but we also have some non-newcomers who either are so credit deficient that they can't even get the 180 in their time with us, or they're not newcomers, and they come in pretty credit deficient as a second year sophomore, as an example, that we need to give those that 5th year to. And so that's the majority of these students. I did speak with the district, and they clarified that all of our students were either ATP or ELD, with 3 students being on the list as diploma track sped student who just had enough struggles in school, enough attendance issues in school, didn't pass enough classes, and so we're, you know, a true non-grad, but we gave them a 5th year and they're meeting their grad requirements their 5th year.
And 5th year is not included.
And 5th year would not be included in the next cohort. Thank you for clarifying.
Why took out 5th year and then out of the queue? Is that because of all these, special things?
Clarify the 5th year. So in algebra 2, we only included students who graduated, not students who did not graduate. So that could give us a more accurate understanding.
So then 4 years.
Correct.
So I was asking what.
Because we felt that it was a more accurate picture of who's meeting those A to G completion within 4 years, with that being the A to G keeper of going into college, as well as STEM readiness. That also removes students who are in the ATP program, which could skew the numbers and help us, you know, we could misinterpret the data as not achieving as much as we could understand when students in ATP don't typically take algebra 2. Yeah, thank you for that clarification. A couple other pieces that I wanted to touch upon as we bring closure to just this college and career readiness. What came out on the California dashboard about our EL progress is definitely an area that we all are saying, you know, change needs to be made here. We have ideas of how to improve this, and we also have some thoughts about, you know, why this is like it is. One, you know, the pandemic didn't help with our numbers, so first and foremost. But the second is when we go back and we talk about, you know, those 3 lenses of data, whether it be student or instructional or systems, there's a level of systems here that we could change to better support our students being integrated into the English language at a higher rate. Because as we see as that bottom graph, the number of students that went back a level of proficiency was at 43%. The number of students who progressed 1 level of proficiency is 20%. Our goal would have that flipped, right? We would like to see regressing less than 20 and progressing more than 40. And again, you know, with strong intentions of meeting graduation and supporting academic instructions, we created an EL program that created a lot of ELD science, history, English, ELD courses where a student could spend the majority of their day in 75% EL courses, which means that it's exclusionary, right? And when they're with their peers, a lot of them are speaking Spanish throughout the entire day, except for those small time frames when they're having to repeat back to the teacher what the teacher has said. And so when you think of like what true proficiency it needs to incorporate is integration, is being integrated into an English speaking facility or English speaking opportunity for almost the whole entire school day. And so that way they're getting exposure to having to listen to their peers and to respond to their peers. And as we did some deep dives into other successful districts, we have seen that this is a model that has been helpful for them. As so our changes are not just changes that we're sitting around saying, what do you think we should do to change this? But we're also doing the research of who's been successful with these numbers and how can we learn from their successes. And that's one of the changes that we're making into next year, is more integration into our college prep, and doing that with support for our teachers so that they have the professional learning, they have the resources, they have the coaching through IST to be able to support this integration.
So are we having pretty close, well, a lot of step, but supervision, that's not really the right word either, of the master schedules at both campuses, so that we know this is being implemented the way you're presenting?
So I've been meeting with Daniela and Fabian, who oversee the EL program, almost weekly over the last month and a half, if not every other week, every other week. And we've been talking about instructional materials. We've been talking about the training that teachers needs, and we've been talking about the master schedule program. I follow that up in an email where I summarize our notes and I include the principal on those notes so that we're all making sure that we have the same information about what district alignment means in terms of our ELD program, and then where that site autonomy can come in.
Well, we need district alignment on all the classes, not just for EL, between the two campuses. And is that pretty much true?
So there are some variability in the sense of, and I think, you know, this might be the obvious that you're not stating, but like the types of art classes or CTE classes that we're offering, we're not necessarily aligned on that. The types of science classes that we have are slightly different between the two courses. Even when you get to some of the math classes and the upper level maths, there's some variability in those classes. So we're not lockstep in every type of course that we offer, but where we are in alignment are various sequences. So starting from bio to chemistry and to physics, we see alignment. Algebra 1 to geometry, to algebra 2 to trig, to calc, we see alignment, although we're having conversations of should there be an exception to the rule for that, for those who may have a language barrier. Theta and then Nellie?
Yeah, so, I guess the students have recommended peer-to-peer counseling. So I'm not an educator, but I want to put out there are students who want to learn Spanish, and there are students who want to learn English. So perhaps the students, you know, where they, students for adults, that might be one way to break down this lack of information that we've talked about.
Thank you. One of our schools has a program where our ELs, I don't know the level, EL2s, let's say, goes into Spanish 2. And they have dialogue and there's prompts and they're having to engage in both Spanish back and forth and then English back and forth. And it's been a really beautiful partnership that I've seen, not just between the teachers, but the students in having that as an English only speaker, learning Spanish and having to speak Spanish to a Spanish speaker is really intimidating. And it's been great to put that out there for them and build their confidence, and then vice versa for our EL. And I would love to see even more of that across our courses. Agree with you.
I just wanted to comment that your question is a good one, because we have gone some bumps in the road. We have created the courses that are A2G or support EL, but as we go back, we're seeing that we could have done a better job of monitoring exactly which students are in which particular class. So that's another portion of it. So that's kind of our monitoring that we do as well. And I know, Terry, you're working with the counselors and talking about this.
And I have heard one comment from whatever that it's hard sometimes to get, say, your EL classes in and say the choir class you want to be in too, because they're coincidentally scheduled. And so things like that, it's not just the EL or just the one department. It's when it's everybody has to kind of orchestrate together with those could be the meeting and F and G one, A
Yep.
and G.
And
Mhm.
Carrie's done a lot of work around master schedule training, so it's
Yeah.
front down in the last 2 years.
Cool.
And I just engaged in a master schedule academy with the 2 master schedule APs between the 2 sites, and the focus was about equitable, student-centered master schedules that get into the, how you doing the puzzle pieces, but then it's also was around how are you building in interventions within a master schedule that doesn't call for a full class to be a full intervention class. And so what are some creative ways to use the schedule for that?
Well, then you also. You have to line that. And not the schedule is not an easy job.
Yeah, and it's one of the most important jobs.
And your.
I'll pass it on. Thank you. So this is a broad overview of the SAT and SAT data. I know that there was interest in taking a closer look at actual cohorts that show students from one year to another and seeing if there's progression and or in what areas. This, you can take a look at 10th grade in 2022 and 11th grade in 2023 and assume that there's going to be some similarities, but these are not cohort specific. As you look at the data, it's interesting in that 10th grade PSAT, we have slightly higher numbers of meeting benchmark than our juniors taking the PSAT. But I also want to know that there is a portion of our juniors who don't take the PSAT with us. They choose to take the SAT. And so there's, again, because we're not looking at cohorts, we don't have all of those numbers available to give us the answers that we have questions to. But then when we look at the 11th grade SAT to 12th grade SAT, we do see improvement in those meeting benchmark in both the ELA and the math of the SAT between those 2 areas.
Yeah. So, you have to, I mean, the data, I'm not sure what is you're looking to get out of this data. But there's a lot of variability here.
Yep.
One is obviously the SAT becoming less important especially for the UCs and CSUs. So the students that, from the schools that may require it, probably not maybe that those top level schools that make some of them, and some of them are short cartographic as well. So you may only see a very specific cohort of students that are going to be focused on the area. The 11th grade, 12th grade, obviously, these are students that are focused on want to improve their scores. Right, those students, probably a lot of them, right?
And they're getting coaching or.
Some may not. I think there's people who take courses.
Clearly, an exam where if you study for it, you can be better. So to me, it's not an indicator of how we're doing in the school. It's how well you can, whether or not you have the resources to study for this particular.
Let me speak not to the SAT, but to the PSAT. If we give the PSAT to everybody in 10th grade and 11th grade, we will receive diagnostic reports on their readiness with respect to indicators of academic success in college. So, for example, an academic vocabulary, reasoning ability, things like this. These are things we should be teaching, and they give us diagnostic input per student. So you could look at a particular student's score, say the student has a great academic vocabulary, or the student needs a lot of work in an academic vocabulary. So we get a lot of diagnostic information, completely irrelevant to what is going to happen in 12th grade for this particular student, but what we should do for this particular student between now and 12th grade.
Well, I would have to respectfully disagree because the reason that colleges are moving away from it is what the studies have shown.
So no, TSAT.
The student's GPA is what makes the difference in their success in college.
Well, the college board would disagree with you.
Well, of course, they would think all the time.
Yeah, but of course, the colleges that want a certain distribution and to get them off the hook would say something else. But I think the point is, I'm focusing on the PSAT, not the SAT, which is the subject of your controversy.
Okay,
No college requires or accepts the PSAT. That's,
Well, it's stuff that you've done on that safety, but I don't honestly get that.
I guess it would be interesting to eventually track, is the number of students that do take the PSAT. I know we offer it for free to everyone to take.
Mhm.
And, but now that the SAT, I think, becomes less relevant. And everybody's still off to want to take it, whether they want to opt out, because then, you know, what's the point, right? They say,
Yeah.
well, I can take it, but I mean, there's the National Merit Scholarships, obviously, so maybe then they have to take the SAT to get.
I can pull the attendance on our,
Wonder if that is going to fluctuate over years, it might not. And
Not too much.
I do think it is one data point that it is good for us to continue to track, because it's also, we are getting all students to take it. Then I think it is one indicator that is somewhat nationally recognized, right? That this is the standardized that we can at least gauge how well our students are doing on average.
But
I
also,
just give us one data point.
yeah, and I would say that if we're only getting, you know, our most academically prepared students to take the test, then it's actually not.
But we're not, right?
So
But that's
all
not,
students.
but that's not,
we give it during the school day.
yeah, that is pretty.
Yeah, yeah.
The P-
Data, the data would, oh.
We take attendance, so if you're absent, we count it as an unexcused absent.
Oh, okay.
So students here. Or the
So students are to show up. Mhm.
so, I think it's why don't we require it for all students in 10th and 11th?
We do,
Well, we do.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
sure.
it's during the instructional day, students are to come, we mark them absent if they don't come, just like an instructional day, they're required.
Is the one that we should.
So the SAT is for seniors and that is optional.
Now, option for college, so.
And off the cuff, I would say that we probably have 60 to 70% of our seniors take the SAT. 60 or 60, 65. We have a high percentage of our seniors coming to take the SAT. This is something that we started post-pandemic, funded by the foundation. Part of it is that it's becoming harder and harder for students to find the SAT offered on Saturdays. And some of them are having to fly to other states or drive to Southern California. And so because of that request, we brought it into part of our instructional day.
That percentage actually matches what we're doing with people in that room that go ahead first. So that makes sense. If you pass the SAT, and you would take the SAT, you don't. Then why would you?
There's no pass, there's no pass. I mean, just forward, there's no pass.
I do it.
Meeting or not meeting benchmark, yeah.
Not being benchmark. If you're gonna score poorly on an SAT, then you're not gonna present it to college. So why spend the time?
What is the, I guess, well, what is the, what I guess for that, I didn't know, what is the benchmark for PSAT? How do we, how is that measured? We want the PSAT, there's a benchmark, I guess, it wouldn't say, I actually, I never realized.
There's not a met or anything like that. You get a score, a numerical score.
Numerical score, right? But, no, I guess maybe that's fine, but when you say benchmark, I guess you have a color coded on benchmark.
Yeah, so this is pulled straight from College Board, where they deem a certain level shows a certain level of proficiency, if you will, at the level of the PSAT. And so students in their reports are given something similar to, are you meeting, are you meeting the benchmark where colleges would be looking at your score and saying, this is somebody who could be successful in our courses, or are they below that level, which then would say, ooh, this score is, low enough to where I would have concerns them coming in.
That is something I would be interested in knowing, specifically for our district, our students, relative to other partnering districts, how, in terms of how they're the benchmark that they call for users.
Didn't have everything fall in the benchmark.
All of that.
Just that one.
And I don't know whether they have it,
College
you know,
Board.
if we can do it for demographic either, or not apply, but at least comparative to other districts.
So, I'd like to make a request, we'll talk about this later tonight, but for future board meeting report, if we could have a discussion of the kind of information we get back from the PSAT for each student. So we should ask ourselves whether there is value here for our academic program to improve in these areas, because I really like the idea of having objective reference points for every one of our students that can be compared to students not only here, but in other schools.
Mhm. Noted, thank you. Okay. Wrong way. So in summary, we took a look at our indicators, our milestones that supports college preparedness. A brief summary of the big four that we took a look at by our big four categories. We see in some of our categories a lot of students being successful, but we do see in general, and Esme, you pointed this out early on, our Latino population is the trending demographic that is underneath our others, missing the opportunity. There's a conversation that I had with Mrs. Ranieri when we were at the AVID conference, and it was an article that referred, at first it was called the achievement gap, right? There's the achievement gap, but that kind of puts it on the student of you're not making the grade, so you're underachieving. And then it shifted to the opportunity gap and understanding that some students have far more opportunity and resources throughout life that makes this challenge. And the most recent article called it the obligation or the responsibility gap, and was saying as a school district, it is our responsibility to make sure that we're reaching out, that we're providing interventions, and we're not just saying like, you know, hey, you can always go to the tutorial center if you want to, but we're helping that relational connection to get them into that resource. And so it's an interesting way of considering the gap that we continue to work on and say, what is our responsibility in narrowing this gap in these aspects? And so that is the end of our presentation with the indicators. We still have not gone into AP or CASP, and we have somewhat equal amount of slides and information. And at the same time, I want to point out that we're 20 minutes over in our time. And so if I could just ask the board, what would you like to do in next steps?
How long do you think our first session will be?
30 minutes.
30 minutes. So we need time to eat it there. How long do you think the rest of this would take, Sarah?
Well, everybody asks really good questions and gives great ideas at which I'm taking notes. So
Let me ask for a sense of the board. Would you like to plow on, or would you like to have Terry come back and pick this up at a later meeting?
Okay, later meeting.
I would vote on later.
Yeah, I don't want to rush Harry.
I know it's not an official vote, but.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So with that, are there any last thoughts or questions as we then conclude our indicator data?
Well, and we can also always send you more questions offline, and we can look over AP things and reload you with another question.
Yeah, when Terry comes back for part 2, if any questions have occurred, you can bring them up.
So I do want to just assure you that this data isn't just spending all of Shawnee's days and hours putting together binders that collects dust. There's a lot of conversations that happen with this and then throughout the entire year. Currently, just to summarize some of our next steps, we're working to revamp our ELD program. That includes the courses that our students are in, the instructional materials, the professional learning for our teachers, and the A to G courses. We're continuing to look at our co-teaching courses, providing, we just about 3 weeks ago had training for our co-teachers, and that's being followed up next semester with walkthrough observations and debriefing and looking at areas that we can increase that co-teaching for inclusivity. Like I said, constructing meaning training district-wide, that's that universal tier 1 instructional practice that supports and helps all students. And it really gives that helpful access point point to those who struggle to access college prep. We're working, I just talked about that, working to support all students in grade level core classes. This could mean during the day or expanded day, and also rethinking how we're doing our tutorial and our ACT periods. Right now, it's you go anywhere you want. And we see a group of students push into the gym to hang out, and you can look at all those students and say, ooh, there's somewhere that probably would be more helpful for this. And so how are we revamping those tutorial periods to really support students who could use targeted support? Continue with the summer academy. We also did an AP Strong Start in the summer. And so taking a look at our summer as what are some extended learning opportunities that accelerates, not remediates our students, and our child find for 504s or other services. And, you know, when we look at 504 data, we see that there's disproportionality, and are there students that are just not being advocated by their parents or themselves that we could see as having perhaps some sort of challenge or disability that could give them some 504 accommodations. And so those are all items that we're working with our sites on, our district, and all of those various committees to be in support of this piece. And so as I started this, I'll just conclude by thanking you guys, all of you, our trustees, for your dedication and your commitment to taking the amount of time to look through the binder, look through the data, and come with the hard questions that we need to ask to make sure that we are really moving in the right direction or considering areas that we need to improve that perhaps some of us are overlooking. So thank you for your time.
So when I ask you one more question there, so given that we are struggling with the responsibility gap, this is now for me, when you're ready, since we have a presentation from all the different departments, I think it would be great when the BLO or BLP department is ready, you're ready to come and present these things.
Thank you.
So, yes, my feedback, and you can take this to the teacher, right? One thing that we're very proud of. You know, I've been working at the state for a few years now, and you know, like the one that she talked about, the metric that we started, you know, about 5-6 years ago. Those percentages were very low when we started it. They're much higher today. I know we focused a lot of our discussions on the Yale students. I think on 250 students or so. And I know every year, you know, in terms of the level that each of those students come in is variable every year, right? So the level of efficiency that come in, level of experience, right, that they come in of going through a full system. So I think it's you know, it's very difficult to solve. And I think our people are doing a commendable job trying to, you know, do the best. It's very, very to me, I mean, it shows the data that we're seeing today, especially when I saw the FPEC data, and I saw this data, you know, in several categories. So really appreciate the work that you put together, and please give feedback to the team.
I will definitely pass that on. Thank you for saying that.
I just wanted to say yes to all of that. And focus on what needs to be improved, because if I just said thank you all the time, it would be okay turn.
Yeah,
Thank you.
I'm very happy. I feel like we can be very happy campers as leadership, you know, trustees of this district, and that we should be happy campers for how you're implementing things. And the children should be happy campers for the progress they're making.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Absolutely.
yeah.
I'm happy because I'm not a kid.